when you study and analyze religion, you find that people who believe, it's because they need to find a certain order or a system in a situation of chaos. So in that sense, analyzing religion and why people think that religion might structure their lives could be a useful way of analyzing and studying international humanitarian law, in the sense that IHL is also a way in which you can find some structure and order in a situation such as an armed conflict in which your existence might be at stake. My name is Emiliano Buis. I'm a professor of international law and the director of the Observatory of International Humanitarian Law at the University of Buenos Aires in Argentina. And I'm also a member of the advisory board of the Generating Respect project. There are many factors that might influence norm compliance in international law. This is one of the big challenges we have when assessing and addressing this problem. One of the things is that, of course, there are as many factors as you can find when trying to analyze the reasons for violence and war. As there are a number of factors that influence war, there's a number of factors that might influence compliance. The factors are not only individual, but also collective, and this is also one of the challenges we have. When you consider why a person complies with law, is somehow a little different to analyzing when a collective behaves in a certain way. So I think this is one of the aspects that should be considered. There's usually a culture of compliance, as there might be a culture of violence in certain contexts. What is astonishing and surprising is that in many cases, traditional perspectives have only focused on what I would say formal legal mechanisms and factors of compliance. And this is, I think, a big problem. The problem arises because in general, when you consider law, the mechanisms in which compliance is analyzed are basically related to responsibility, to monitoring, to incentives, and this is only one part of the issue. I think that some other factors should be taken into account if we want to analyze why a person or a group complies and behaves in a certain manner. The Generating Respect project, I think it's very interesting because it can provide a number of new avenues to analyze compliance in this area. One of the aspects I like the most about the project is that it focuses on religion. In general, religious actors have been, I would say, kind of underestimated or neglected in analyzing compliance. So the possibility of assessing the interrelationship between religion and law is one of the aspects, I think, that characterizes the project in an interesting way. Another thing which is interesting about the project is the fact that it focuses on case studies. The fact that there's no universal way of dealing with the problems of compliance, I think it's one of the assets. The fact that you can analyze how people behave in Mali or Ukraine or Yemen or Colombia gives you different ways of focusing on religion. This also allows to analyze religion in a global manner. So it's not just dealing with a certain worship or a certain religious belief. You consider different ways of perceiving religion. So I think that's another factor. And maybe the third factor which could be interesting to consider is the idea that when you deal with religious leaders, you're not only dealing with mechanisms for compliance, but also maybe mechanisms for violation. Religious leaders are authorities, they are respected, and they can comply or have an interesting role and a positive role in assuring compliance, but at the same time, and I think that recent history, very recent history can show this, religion can also be triggered as a way of promoting non-compliance with law or even violations of law. So I think that focusing on religious leaders can provide you both ways of analyzing how compliance and non-compliance work in an interdependent way. Another aspect which is interesting about the project is the fact that it focuses on a very interesting methodology. It's not only a theoretical project on how to deal with compliance, but it also takes into account interviews. It goes to different places in order to talk to people who are, in fact, those who respect or behave according to the law in specific places. So focusing on people means having a dialogue with stakeholders. And I think that's one of the basic points of the project. Traditional approaches are very legalistic in the way in which they deal with the problem. So a project like this one, like Generating Respect project, can also include some new perspectives which have traditionally been left aside. So in that sense, I think that it fits beautifully with other ways of analyzing the problem. For example, I can talk about the critical studies movement, in which positivism is left aside because you have to consider that when dealing with law, you're not only focusing on legality, you're always focusing on values as well. At the same time, it also fits with other movements which are related, for example, with the theory of emotions, in the sense that affects and sentiments are a way in which people move towards a certain end. There's also behavioral studies, which also, I think, are very well related to the project. You analyze how a pattern of conduct is replicated, reproduced, and sometimes even abandoned or left aside. In that sense, I think that the project has a methodology which goes along with many of these critical ways of analyzing a legal problem from an extra-legal perspective. And I think that's one of the assets of such a project.